So, a couple things have obviously been happening, and there's a framework that has really gotten me through a lot of uncertain times. So, right now, there's a lot of people really excited, right? And there are also some people that are feeling really uncertain. So, there's, I would say, a polarized bit going on, and I haven't shared my framework. There's certain steps that I found through the years of hell and high water, right? Like going through the doctorate program, going from being not able to afford anything to eat and not being able to have, heat in the house to now living a life that I'm sure y'all can agree, like we have a great life now, having achieved and y'all are amazing leaders in your own right. And I've noticed there are a couple constants. There's actually 10 facets. I call it a framework that's got me through those times, and I wanted to share it with everyone. So we're just going to go through those 10. And at the end, we can kind of talk about it or not. It should take like 15 minutes. So the most important, and it was and is a very popular book, Knowing Your Why, I found was really important for me in my journey, starting from being really confused and, like I said, not being able to afford anything, having an empty fridge, right? Not being able to clean my apartment after my dog because I couldn't afford a mop or I couldn't afford anything. And having the right path was super important. So I know that you guys are on a path that you really feel is for you. And at some point, I didn't know the path I really wanted to go on, but I knew that it was important to wait on that and to know why I was actually taking the steps for the doctorate, know why I was taking the steps for the MBA, know why I was taking the steps to XYZ. So that's the first one. And the advice for sharing for other leaders for, the network would be to really keep it simple. If we can't identify the why, it's important to just keep it simple. Small network, notebook. I personally had a verse that kept me going, that kept me on a certain mindset. I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. So that was my verse connected to my why. And it's vital during stressful periods to just go back to that. So that's the first one for me in my framework. And if one is a leader who finds themselves in chaos, that's one thing that is probably missing. Knowing your why, knowing you're having a focus, having a center of gravity. And we'll talk about community and faith and all that, but in general, developing your why. And of course, we know there's a book on that to focus on too. But if one does find oneself to be a leader in chaos, knowing your why is a good first step. And I found it is very effective. And then the second that I found to be really effective is having mental health resources. I'll say like utilizing. So if one is a leader and one is not involved in mental health resources, whether it's quarterly, monthly, going to a counselor, finding a counselor that you like, that might be one of the sources of chaos as well. And that's generally an issue. So that's a habit to reverse if you're not taking advantage of the mental health resources on the apps, right? We love BetterHelp. We love a digital. Some people like the accountability of going in person. But I found in my life, finding the counselor that I match with and not being afraid to, one, choose the counselor that I really like, that really fits the dynamic I'm going for, whether that's man or woman, and selecting one, but also not being afraid to change, because that's just their job. They don't take it personally. So general leaders that find themselves in chaos, I found also aren't really utilizing their mental health resources that are available. So that's important to plug in. And just keeping it simple, once a quarter, once a month, generally that works really well. Cultivating a supportive community. Leaders that find themselves in chaos generally are islands. And one thing that's important to note in that through the transition, I like to say I'm on my third life. So I'm 37. I've gone through one cycle of 18 and officially through another cycle of 18 years. And so I'm on my third life, the beginning of my third phase. And I'll say in the past where I found myself in chaos is where I was really an island. And so in this third, it's really about collaborating and having relationships and having a supportive community, one that you can select. So leaders who find themselves really overwhelmed, generally analyzing one's community could be really helpful. And keeping it simple, you can join clubs, just keep it, my personal circle, I like to keep it pretty intimate just because I lose track of folks, right? And a lot of times quality is better than quantity, but it's all, people have their different types of support that they need. So obviously it's important to consider the type of characters that you have in your life and the type of characteristics you have. I found it does take a lot of intention, and I'm sure y'all can testify to it takes a lot of intention to work through our personal lives, our careers, our families, our relationships, to develop the friendships and communities that we really want. It does take intention, and it does take planning and effort. So understanding one's hobbies, which some leaders, we know our hobbies, but at some point maybe it wasn't quite understood what the hobby was. So taking some time to really understand that and maybe even cultivate new hobbies is really important. And then seeking those out in online or in person. And then doing an energy audit to be sure that they are specifically supportive communities could make all the difference. And that's what I found. Physical activity. Leaders who are feeling overwhelmed or in chaos generally have low energy levels, right? Or really aren't moving the body that they're using every day. And I found that makes a huge difference. You love the energy audit. I love that you love the energy audit, Taylor. The physical activity. So leaders that find themselves in chaos, generally, I have found I haven't been moving my body. And so that's one thing to really check on. Are you doing, and there's a whole spectrum, of course. There's the YouTube yoga. There's the Pilates class that meets twice a week, Saturday, Wednesday. Stretching. There's, of course, we have the gyms where you really do your workout. But what's important to, I've learned, to really respect the trio of mind, body, spirit. And body is not to be ignored. Because what I'm seeing now, as I'm in the field dealing with patients, if you don't really stretch your body and move your body, it's going to lock up on you. And that creates its own chaos and health issues later in life. And keeping it simple and consistent, accountability, paying for it, so you know you're meeting Saturday and you know you're meeting on Wednesday, just plugging that in is best to just be consistent. Creating an environment you enjoy. I have found that makes all the difference. And so, again, leaders who find themselves a little chaotic, auditing the environment, you spend about 8 hours a day. So I know some folks are at home, so being sure that the environment you're in, either you are on Fiverr or you're on Thumbtack hiring a designer that can really ensure that the space that you're in at home, if you're working from home, is something that nourishes you, right? Really being present and analyzing, how does it feel? What work do I need to put into this? What's really bothering me? And I've kind of pushed it down or just kind of ignored it and just went about my day because you have other things to do, and that's understandable. However, our environments do affect us. So I've learned not being afraid to be present is really important, and taking the small steps of either sourcing that out or doing it myself to just be sure my environment, whether it's at work or at home, is something that really nourishes me. So at work, if you actually go to an office, do you have a window? If you don't have a window, do you have mirrors around that kind of, or a different kind of window? Do you have plants? Do you have the water fountain? So I found that's really important. So if one is a leader, and I've been in these situations at work where I just feel super chaotic, but I found once I changed my work environment, implementing the different design or kind of moved around where I needed to go, that really helped. That helped me feel calm and aligned. And, that translates to the team, that translates to patients, that translates to friends, family, everything. Addressing personal life challenges head on. So this is a huge one for me. And it does kind of relate to mental health resources, but I can lie to a counselor all day, to be honest. I really can. So journaling is really important. I have found that life can be circular, and if one is just courageous and puts it on the table, whether with a counselor or with journaling or with painting it out or just in saying it or just in crying, right? One, processing that in reality helps you get to the next phase, whether it's the next phase in leadership, the next phase of just your personal being. That's really important. So if one feels like you're in chaos, maybe I've learned that maybe I'm ignoring something. So what are we ignoring? And I have been there for about it. I've been in that cycle for a year before, and it's been, you survive, because survival is a thing too. Like sometimes you just can't process. So when you are in that safe space to process, that's what you do, and you progress, practicing spiritual reflection and community engagement. Church or whatever. Basically church. So church has been really important to me, and community involvement has been really important to me in the process of growth here. And again, ensuring that we are not an island as leaders. We can't be an island. That's just not. I'm learning with some other resources I've been into lately. That's one source of survival, but that's not influencing. That's not really leading by being an island. And we can choose our community. We can choose the community that's within our supportive network, and we can choose the community in which we support. And that can help us. That connects to the why in some ways. It doesn't have to connect to the why. It grows the heart. It grows kind of an alignment, a clarity of mind. I felt it really brought me. So leaders that find themselves in chaos, like, are you actually connected to a greater good? Just as Oprah says, something greater than oneself. So that's cool. I haven't made that alignment yet. That me and Oprah made the same alignment once. So being connected to something greater than oneself can really ensure that you as a leader have clarity and out of chaos. If it's a church, be sure it's one that you respect, and get involved as much as you can, because there's a lot of different communities. There's a lot of different churches. So, and sometimes just figuring out random things, like trying different paths and trying different places of worship, can be really fun and adventurous. But definitely keep it simple. Like, don't stress about it. It should be something uplifting, and plug into the leaders that really support you. I have found that being around community leaders and that are in the organizations and that or are the church leaders, but being sure that there's a supportive ones, works best. Making space where one is not welcome, or where one does not feel celebrated, that's a move on situation. That means create a vacuum, I found, and just that, because that creates more chaos for oneself. If you stay in a community organization for the most part, that's what I found. It's important to communicate with people and move on, so you have those choices. With community, no one is perfect, and in community, we do find our greater purpose a lot of times. So customizing professional workload. I'll say my professional workload. So if one finds oneself chaotic, what can we do to modify, generally speaking, where most of us are 8 hours a day, or at least 3 days a week? If one feels chaotic, is it the workload? Leaders that are feeling, well, I'll say it like this. Sometimes part-time is better than full-time. Or put another way, just earning more and working less could be ideal. But it's all about personalization. But it's definitely something to check in on. And I found that modifying my workload definitely brings me more peace, or modifying, the location definitely helps. Sometimes working part-time for a season is best, and that's what I found. But definitely keep it simple. Talk to your allies, and I found that it works really well to create calm. And then you grow in other ways once you've customized that workload. It's been really helpful. Take time to rest and reflect. So leaders who don't take time for themselves on a daily or a couple times a week basis, generally that can also be a source of chaos. So ignoring oneself and the fact that our bodies need rest, ignoring the fact that our minds need to rest 8 hours a day, being sure that you have auditing your sleep and being really serious about the sleep that you're having. And for me, it's okay, let's not brush it off, right? Let's address this head on. So being sure that screen time, when I have had sleep challenges, is screen time being really reduced, maybe an hour or two before bed. So that's been really helpful. We love the melatonin, but stretching and, the candlelight, and being sure that everything calms down before is really important. And without that, generally, it can lead to a feeling of unrest. Reflect. Generally, just pouring out in a journal, I've found works really helpful. If one hasn't journaled or, just kind of word vomited, either in a voice note or physically written it down, just like writing down stream of consciousness, that could be a source of overwhelm as well. So I've found that's really important. So that's not a full reflection, but it's on the spectrum for sure of reflecting. So last but not least, engaging in passion projects. Generally speaking, leaders who are or overwhelmed aren't having a lot of pleasure in life outside of, not pleasure in life outside of, but aren't having a lot of pleasure in life, period, and possibly are just too serious. So engaging in passion projects, something that can be a hobby, right? Just keeping it simple. Maybe it's, some yarn that you have. Maybe it's your plants that you water. Maybe it's just going to different nurseries and shopping for a plant that you find attractive and that brings you peace and that really inspires you and brings you a cool feeling. That's important. It's definitely what I found to be vital, because we're not meant to, what I've found is we're not really meant to push all the time. And we have all these other facets. I'd say 30%. So 30%, 30%, 30% work, community, and then your personal projects. It's really important to have what's the balance in life. And I know you guys love your work-life balance. And I'm excited to chat with you more about kind of the frameworks that maybe you all have found in your journey of being leaders, in your networks and at work and just in your own lives. And this is the framework that I found really worked for me. And I found without these elements, I definitely spiral into chaos, and it's been really helpful to get this ironed out. All right, I'll talk to you later.